Good day, ma'am. I am Bahinting Larry M., your student in CE 200 Section A. Today, I'm going to discuss the institutional-based correction. So, these are the lesson. Discuss the global view on prison administration, prison antiquity to modernity, the influence of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope John Paul, the pro-life Pope, Walnut Street Jail, King Henry VIII, and King Edward VI, a jewel of King Henry VIII. So, correction. Correction is a branch of the criminal justice system concerned with the custody, supervision, and rehabilitation of criminals offenders. So, correction it is the field of criminal justice administration which utilize the body of knowledge and practices of the government and the society in a general involving the process of handling individuals who have been convicted of offenses for purposes of crime prevention and control. So, institutional correction is a report by the Bureau of Justice Statistics or BGS says it is the aspect of the correctional enterprise that involves the confinement and the rehabilitation of adults and juveniles convicted of offenses against the law and the confinement of persons suspected of a crime awaiting trial and adjudication. So, institutional correction is nabilong diri ang rehabilitation of adults and juveniles. So, rehabilitation siya sa mga dagko or sa gulang naan sa mga bata nga nag-convict of any crimes. So, adjudication means formal judgment. So, katong nag-convict og crime mo kuan sa adjudication para makuanan sila formal judgment. Prison is a penitentiary, an institution for the imprisonment or incarceration of persons convicted of major serious crimes. It is also a place established for the purpose of taking safe custody or confinement of criminals. In the prison facility, all prisoners should be treated with respect and without discrimination. Torture or other forms of ill treatment are strictly prohibited. Criminal justice system. It is the system of law enforcement that is directly involved in apprehending, prosecuting, defending, sentencing, and punishing those who are suspected or convicted of criminal offenders. And it is also a machinery of the government to protect lives and property. The 5 pillars of criminal justice system. The first is the law enforcement. Law enforcement, they are the forefront of the CGS in the country. They are the one who directly deal with the citizen and directly expose to criminal elements, suspect or persons of interest. So, the law enforcement like our police, Sila mao'y mauna nga mo mo expose sa mga sa criminals, especially the kuan, like mag committing a crimes. So next is the prosecution. Prosecution, it investigate and or causes to be investigate at all the charges of crimes and violates of the penal laws within their respective jurisdiction and have necessary information or complaint prepared or made and filed against the person. So prosecution refers to the lawyers in a trial who try to prove that a person accused of committing a crime is a guilty of that crime. So that is the prosecution. Next is the court. Court, it represented by judge and justice depending on court. It is the final arbiter of controversies of competing claims and interests, including the determination of the guilt or innocence of the person charged with the commission of crime. So the courts decides what really happened and what should be done about it. They decide whether a person committed a crime and what the punishment should be. They also provide a peaceful way to decide private dispute that people can't resolve themselves depending on the dispute or crime. Some cases end up in the federal courts and some end up in the state courts. So next is correction. It involves the punishment, rehabilitation, and information of convict. All fall under the executive department of the government such as BJMP. So, two approaches of correction. First, the institutional correction and non-institutional correction. So first is the institutional correction refers to the penal establishment under the control of the Bureau of Correctional and shall include the New Bilibid Prison and other correctional institution. And the non-institutional correction, it is also called community-based correction. This aspect of the correction is enterprise that includes pardon, probation, and parole. So, the pardon, probation, and parole is under the non-institutional correction. So, probation is disposition under which a defendant convicting and sentence. It is released subject to condition imposed by the court and supervision of probation officer. And the parole, it is the conditional release of the prisoner that correctional institution after serving the minimum period of prison sentence. So, who cannot be granted parole? So, kinsa tong dili magarantihan og parole? Generally, those sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 1 year or less or to a straight penalty or to a prison sentence without minimum term of imprisonment. So, who may grant parole to a prisoner? The Board of Pardon and Parole, an agency under the Office of the Secretary of Justice. Community. Community refers to the elements that are mobilized and energized to help authorities in effective addressing the law and other concern of citizenry. Community also is the most critical and useful component view of its massive and pervasive composition. So, uh, the citizen can achieve these roles by identifying offenders, giving data about the illegal activities and cohorts of the criminals, the profile relation of organized crimes and syndicates, volunteering as witness and adopting precautionary and medical measures to diminish crime. So, community is very important like us sa aton sa community kung magtabanganay ang tanang katawan so ma-solve dayon ang like for example na crime nga nahitabo di na makakita din mo nay mutabang jud ang kita magtabanganay ta so kaysa to nakita mo kuan sa mo witness as a witness so dali ra jud masolve ang kaso. So in 2018, the Philippines held the sixth highest prison population out of 21 Asian countries. As of 2019, the Philippines population rested at 108.31 million people and 215,000 of those people were incarcerated. Therefore, the Philippines has an incarceration rate of about 200 per 100,000 citizens. So there are 933 prisons running in the Philippines. Unfortunately, they are mismanaged and overcrowded. Below are 5 important facts about the incarceration system in the Philippines. So the five facts about the five fact about the Philippines incarceration system. So first is severe overcrowding. Rodrigo Duterte won the presidential election in 2016. He promised to end crime within 6 months. This promise also included the killing of tens of thousands of criminals. Duterte's election led to infamous war on drugs and eventually overcrowded prisons. So sa administration ni Pangulong Duterte na na puno jud maayo tong kuan ato ang tanang halos tanang prisuhan na napunog mga pineriso tungod kay na ang usa man gud niya nga gi kuan ato is priority is drug war on drugs so kinsa tong na nag-drugs nga priso jud kay like katong sa programa niya na tong tukhang tuktok dalang hangyo sa mga balay kung dili mo sugot dili mo kuan mo tong dili mo surrender tong kuan nag-warrant so mo tong kung isa tong mga drug lord or mga tigamit surrender gud laman kay napay posibilidad nga pamatyon sila. So Manila City Jail, the largest jail in the Philippines, is split into dorms that safety house 170 inmates. Currently, these dorms house around 500 people. So see, ang Manila City Jail before, kuan lang, 170 inmates lang. Pero pag kuan sa Administrasyong Duterte, abot na siya 500. So, crowded na gyud kayo. Puno tungod atong sa iyang kuan, sa iyang plataporma na atong sa before 6 months kung ano dyan ang drugs. Similarly, a room designated for 30 people holds about 130 in the Quezon City Jail. This severe overcrowding in prisons leads to illness and death tolls in the thousands. So, halos-halos tanan yung jail. Like sa Quezon City Jail pod, 30 people ra, then naabot nag 130. So, crowded na kayo and kung ma-crowded ang usa ka jail, mag-leads na siya kuan. Like, kining death, na uban sa kainit, di nakagwanta, itong mga hiblaron, makuan yun sila, like mamatay, ana, kay kuan naman, init kayo, huot pod. So, the pre-trial detainees. According to the World Prison Brief, 75.1% of incarceration within the Philippines incarceration system are pre-trial. In 2018, 141,422 of 188,278 prisoners were pre-trial and detained. Unfortunately, many people are serving sentence without conviction. So, like sa 2018, ang out of 141 something, ang na pre-trials lang is 188 plus. So, makita na to sa graph na pre-trial detains in the Philippines 2005 to 2018. So, kuan, gikas gamay hangtod nagpataas jud, abot like sa labi na jud sa 2018, taas na jud kayo ang kuan sa mga detainees, mga preso. Pre-trial detention is found in judicial system all over the world. In countries like the Philippines, people may serve time that outweighs their crimes. On average, prisoners in the Philippines detained for 9 months without being sentenced. Next is high death tolls. So, about 5,200 inmates die annually at the New Bilibid person. So, baling daghan na jud ang kuan annual, ang nangamatay annually. Ang annually nga nangamatay sa New Bilibid person atong nga time is 5,200. According to Ernesto Tamayo, the hospital medical chief, these deaths are due to overcrowding, dirty living condition, and inmate violence. So, ang muni ang mga kuan, the muni hinungdan kung ngano nangamatay ang mga inmates sa due to kanang overcrowded na, puno na kayo sila, mga tulog or magkuan na, magtanda maglutod-lutod na ba ana, crowded na kayo niya kuan na pod, like kung pila ra ilang CR dito, kung dirty living condition. So, hugaw na gud sila kaayo, di na po sila kaligo kay puno gud kaayo ana. Din kung kaning uban bisag asa na lang kuan mo kuan sa ilang hugaw. So usa kunis kuan dayong mga matay ang mga prisons, and also the inmate violence. So like for example, kuan na kanang nay mga naman gunay sa prisuhan naman nay mga isay mayor ana nila. Hinapon na mga tao-tao nila. So kung kuan, kung apil po ang mga violente dito kung sa ni like magkuan sila makakitag away ana kay like for example nay ganahan mo higda ato nga kuan nga silda nya dili pa higdaon nya ganahan mo higda, so nagoy uban nga mga matay tungod sa uban ra pod nga prison kay mo commit naman po sila crimes para lang dili mo crowded sa sulod nya saan man. So kuan japon inmate violence. At 2019 Philippine Senate hearing, Tamayo said that there were uncontrollable outbreaks of pulmonary tuberculosis. So nagkakuan na jud ang mga prisons, outbreaks of pulmonary tuberculosis, so di na mapugngan. In addition to overcrowding, poor living conditions, and inmates violence, or NBP, lacks nutritional food and basic health care. On account of these living conditions, Tamayo reports that at least one prisoner dies at NBP each day. So 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 according to Tamayo, kada adlaw na po'y mamatay nga mga prisoners tungod sa kuan tuberculosis. So sorry for the inconvenience. Thankfully, politician and prisons employees are working to reduce overcrowding in the Philippines prisons. Human rights advocates have also called for the release of vulnerable inmates, hoping to protect them for living condition. So next is vigilante justice. Duterte's war on drugs escalated during his presidency. Jobless citizens were recruited to kill anyone suspected of dealing, buying, or using drugs. This was one of few ways for some people to make money. Many homeless and im, impo, impoverished people joined the vigilante team. So like katong mga drug lord or mga buyer ana ni kuan sila sa vigilante justice kay ang mga kuan mga teams ang like sa mga users or drug users kay ni kuan naman si like kaning war on drugs si Duterte na pamatyon kung kisa tong nagkuan nag mukigdeal or namalit o kisa tong kuan mag-use og drugs. In 2016, Duterte told the public, if you know of any addicts, go ahead and kill them yourself. So kuan na kaayo sani mo gani kahadlokan sa mga drug lord or sa mga users nga like kung masakpan ka nga gakuan kay si Duterte na may nitold sa publiko, like for example sa ato sa mga law enforcement kung makita ng mga addict nga magamit, so ipapusil naman diretso. Together the Philippines police force and unidentified gunmen have killed 7,000 known drug dealers and users since the 30s presidency. in 2016. So see, 7,000 known drug dealers and users nga kuan na tani na na patay sa mga law enforcement nga wala na ilhi in 2016. The Philippines war on drugs has created the belief that extrajudicial violence and murder are necessary to fight crimes. But the Human Rights Watch has turned the narrative around on Duterte. They are publishing information about the vigilante justice in the Philippines. Next is the corruption. In August 2018, the public learned a former mayor may have been released from prison for good behavior. He was originally charged for rape and homicide in 1993. Similar stories of corruption in the Philippines prison continued to emerge. So in September 2018, public learned that a woman was told her husband's sentence would be shortened if she paid 50,000 pesos or equivalent to $970. Later that year, senators stated that inmates could live like king for free. So uh so kuan nay like ang so kung bayaran ra ang mga inmates, so muning ang senator na kung bayaran like ani nga 50,000, so ang inmates nga nag-commit og crimes mura jud king like live like king for a free. Kay like for example katong daghang kwarta bayaran ra ang mga bayaran na ilang kaso. So mo nga gikuan jud sa Senate. This information leads to further allegation. Prison workers and officials were taking breves to bring and distribute contraband to inmates. The contraband in question included cigarettes, cell phones, and television. Supposedly, inmate can also pay for personal cooks and nurses. So, this, like, usa na makahimo ani is katulang kuan itong mga kwartahan jud. Kaya maka na sila sulod, maka-pay sila og kuan. Like, personal cookies, ang mga personal tigloto or nurses. Inmates who cannot afford a better life with the prison are stuck in overcrowded and dirty rooms. These inmates have a higher rate of becoming ill and of death. So, kato mga intawon ra mga kuan, mga ultimo ra mga kuan, mga prisoners loy kaayos kuan sa jail like sa mga prisuhan kay kung di sila ka-afford dito ra jud sila mga mantay. Now that the corruption has been unearthed, officials are taking steps to weed it out the prison at the time. So gikuan jud ni sa mga kuan sa mga official nga dili dapat may mahitabo sa mga prisuhan. Kay luoy kayo, dapat fair. The earliest record of prisons from the first millennia BC located on the areas of mighty ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. During those times, prisons were almost always stationed in the underground. Dangerous were guilty or suspected criminals spent their life either awaiting death sentence or a command to become slaves, often working as galley slaves. Exception from that rule comes from the home of modern democracy in Greece. So their prisoners were held in the poorly isolated buildings where they could often be visited by their friends and family. Primary source of their detention were not dangerous high walls or bars, but simple wooden blocks that were attached to their feet. So the buildings the prisoners nga katong like sa mga pobre nga mga prisoners open ra bisitahon sa mga family kay di man taas man og kuan sani taas kay sila like ilahang dili gud maka kuan kay high kayo taas kayo og kuan kaning mga walls bars lisod gayong kuan like for example na mo takas ana di jud takas. The ancient Roman Empire, however, continued to use harsher methods. Their prisons were built almost exclusively underground with tight and claustrophobic passageway and cells. Prisoners themselves were held either in simple cells or chained to the walls for life or for time. As slavery was accepted norm in those days, majority of prisoners that were not sentenced to death were sold as slaves or used by the Roman government as workplace. So one of the most famous use for slaves in Roman Empire was as the gladiator. In addition to fighting in the arena, sometimes special gladiators training houses or ludus. Many slaves were tasked as a support workforce that enables motor run of the popular gladiator businesses. So one of the most famous users so the gladiator. So kisa tong nakakita gladiators moto ilang kuan. Nice kayo. The most famous gladiator battleground that mighty Colosseum arena in Rome had a slave army of 224 slaves that worked daily as a power source of the complicated network of 24 elevators that transported gladiators and their wild animals opponent from the underground dangerous to the arena floor. Sorry for the inconvenience again, ma'am, because tawagon magud ko, ma'am. Sorry. Next is the condition in the European prisons remained harsh until English royalty stated being more involved with their justice system. Henry II commissioned the construction of first prison in 1166 together with the first draft of English legal system that used concept of injury. One of the most historic prison legislation was introduced in 1215 when King John signed Magna Carta, which stated that no man could be imprisoned without trial. So kani si King John ni ngon siya nga dili dapat prison ang before dili prison dapat ang mga prisoners or the who committed crimes na wala na agig agig trial or hearing ana. France even continued their practice of penal colonies until the middle of 20th century, most notably in Prince Guiana and its infamous prison Devil's Island. And Russia also used remote penal colonies in the frozen northeast Siberia. The age of the modern prison that we know today started with the several prisons reforms in 19th century England. During that time, prisoners stated receiving more care concept of rehabilitation was introduced and governments around the world, especially in UK and US, started reconsidering their views on solitary confinement, which was primary source of the increased numbers of insane, suicidal, and catatonic prisoners. So, ani nga time, goods kayo ang like katong mga prisons kay kuan na sila'y tighandol nila nga dili sila like no kanila like receiving more curse. So katong mga prisoners nga makaluoy na tabangan jud to nila like ani nga time nga mga like sa ato karon dili kay ka samot nagpobre di ka kay makuanon sa mga ato ang mga kuan law enforcement pasagdan ka dito hangtod mamatay. Wars that engulfed the world in the beginning of 20th century brought the formation of large amount of war prisons, camp and concentration camps. Most famous example of the two types of prisons happened during World War II when Nazi government formed over 300 detention centers in which political opponents, Jews, gypsies, criminals, and other were detained without judicial process. So, ani nga time is nagkuhan jud si when Nazi government nagkuhan siya mga detention centers nga like dool sa mga jail. Majority of them was eventually killed on an unprecedented massive scales that is today estimated to be between 11 and 7 million people. During the end of the 20th century, modern prison system was finalized. So the concept of probation service was introduced in 1991 and 3 years before the first prison intended solely for the holding of inmates in permanent isolation was formed. Those supermax prisons become widespread across the entire United States, within 40 of them being active in 2000 in the year 2005. Inmates in those prisons are held in the 23 hours long periods of cell isolation with occasional communal yard time, work, educational programs, and meals in cafeteria. So, ani nga time is magil sila like 23 hours isolate din napay meals and karon bagag napay pakaon nila in the cafeteria like maro siya cafeteria sa Siliman ba na restaurant. As 2006, it is estimated that over 9 million people are imprisoned worldwide, with United States leading in the rate of incarceration 743 per 100 or what is this 100 million people 100 people. So the different types of prisons, antiquity times. From the birth of modern civilization in third millennia BC, almost every major ancient civilization used concept of prisons as a mean to death and remove personal freedoms of incarcerated people. In those early periods of history, prisons were often used as a temporary stopgap before sentencing to death or life of slavery. But at but as time went on our civilization developed developed prisons started morphing into correctional facilities that started implementing those concepts of rehabilitation and reform of prisoners. In addition, of holding convicted or suspected criminals, prisons were often used for holding political prisoners, enemies of the state, and prisoners of the war. The prisons in ancient times. So what are the early prisons? Early prisons were dark, dirty, unhygienic, and overcrowded. So like sa early. Yeah, so sa una walay suga ng ngit-ngit kaayo, nya hugaw pa gyud, walay limpyo-limpyo and puno mga prisoners overcrowded. Tilak at all types of prisoners together, including men, women, and children, plus dangerous criminals, debtors, and clinically insane. So sagol tanan, men, women, may mga bata, may katong mga criminals nga dangerous, kaan kayo, gamay rang sipyat, patay dayon, debtors and the clinically insane. During the late 1700s, the British reformer John Howard toured Europe to observe prison condition. So si John Howard nag-observe siya sa mga prisoner ani nga time. His book The State of the Prison in the England and Wales influenced the passage of law that led to construction of first British prisoners design party for reform. The Mamertine, one of the most in ancient world, created during the era of Roman king sometimes between 640 to 616 BC, located at the foot of Capitoline Hill in Rome. So, the Mamertine is the only prison in the city in Rome. According to Livy, it was the fourth king of Rome, Acnus Marius, who ordered the construction of the prisons. The Romans were the first to introduce imprisonment as a form of punishment, and the Mamertine remained in use for centuries. So, ang Romans mo sila nag-introduce sa sa mga prison nga mga sa tong mapriso nga nadyo punishment. It is worth during that the Mamertine was very different to the prisons of today. So si Ancus Marcius was the legendary the fourth king of Rome, who traditionally reigned 24 years. Upon the death of the previous king, Talus Hostilius, the Roman Senate appointed an interrex, who in turn called a session of the assembly of the people who elected the new king. So si Kuan Tylos Hostilius appoint siya nga para kung sa tuma Mailik og bagong king. So this is Ancus Marcius. Mani siya. So this is the lower chamber of the mamertine. So like mura ra siya giga sa bato ra siya. Mura siya bato. Prisons and imprisonment in the ancient world. Punishment used to maintain public order. One of the most well-known forms of punishment today is imprisonment. One could argue that for any society to function properly, public order has to be maintained. This is an important function of the state, and one of the ways this goal is achieved is through laws. The history of imprisonment can be traced back all the way to the ancient world. The earliest known use of imprisonment as a form of punishment can be traced to the Mesopotamian civilization. So mo ni ilang prison before na mura ni ilang like bintana puro jud rock or unsa ni di jud ka katakas. So religion's role in the prison. Religion's value in prisons is often about its contribution to the individual growth or development of particular inmates. The focus is to perceive role of religion in helping lower the changes of recidivism among inmates. Other reasons, it focuses on the immediate value that religions have for inmates through their helps in their coping and survival. Religion ideally serves several functions. It gives meaning and purposes of life, reinforce social unity and stability, serves as an agent of social control, promotes psychological and physical well-being, and may be motivated people to work and positive social change. So, ang religion is very important in the in prison in the anang sa mga prisoners. Important kay siya kay for example katong mga bad mga bugoy kayo so nagoy posibilidad nga magbago sila tungod sa religion. Imprisonment under church jurisdiction become a substitute for corporal or capital punishment. In medieval times, the Roman Catholic Church developed penal techniques later used by secular states such as the monastic cell that serve as the punishment place for criminal offenders. In 1593, the Protestant of Amsterdam built a house of correction for women and one for men in 1603. So, nice kayo ang kuan. Like sa mga Protestant, nag-build sila og kuan. Mga, para sa mga bahay lang o sa mga laki. In Rome, what are now the sisters of the Good Shepherd built correctional facilities for women. And in 1703, Pope Clement the 11 built the famous Michel prisons as a house of correction for younger offenders with separation, silence, work, and prayer emphasized. So, in this time, nagkuhan sila ang katong mga buutan like si Clement the 11 nag-build siya og kuan house para sa katong sa mga bata, itong mga batanon pa. Then para ma-emphasize jud, para manlahi ra. So kuan para sa separation of silence, work and prayers. As late as the 18th century, the Vatican prisons still serve as a model prisons designed for Europe and America. Early settlers of North America brought with them and customs and commonly laws of England, including the pillory, the stock, and the whipping post. During the 18th century, isolating offenders from fellow prisons became the accepted correctional practice. It was thought that long-term isolation combined with a deep discussion with clergy would lead inmates to repent or become penitent. Sorry for this sense. That's the term penitentiary was derived. Volunteers also have a long history in correctional that can be traced back to the beginning of prisoners. In the last 200 years, many religious groups have entered correctional facilities to provide religious services to inmates. So, sa in last 200, dagan kayong mga mga like mga volunteers na nisulod sa mga volunteers ng mga religious nisulod sa mga prisulan para mo kuan sa mga inmates mo sa ilang sumayo buhaton. One of the most famous advocates for volunteers in correction was Maud Ballington Booth, the daughter-in-law of William Booth, who founded the Salvation Army. So Maud Ballington Booth, Maud Ballington Booth is the co-founder of Volunteers of America, advocates for prisoners and their families, and inaugurator of the Volunteer Prisons League. So kani day si Maud Ballington mo ni siya co-founders. On September 13, so murag kuan ni siya. September 13 1865 to August 26, 1948. So mo ni si Maud Ballington Booth. Bahay day siya Maud. So William Booth, English Methodist preacher who along with his wife Catherine founded the Salvation Army and became the first general. So usab ni siya William Booth. So on April 10, 1829 to August 20, 1912. He preached hope and salvation. His aim was to lead them to Christ and link them to a church for continued spiritual guidance. So, muna iyang kuan, muna iyang murag ipambuhat na siya mo lead sa Christ, payon sa Christ, then muling siya payon sa church para continue sa mga sa mayo sa mga sa imong spiritual guidance. Provision of homes for homeless, safe house for prostitutes, legal aid given to those who could not afford it, hostel, alcoholism support, and employment center. So, si William Booth. Catherine Booth, January 17, 1829 to October 4, 1890, co-founder of the Salvation Army along with her husband William Booth. So wife ni siya ni William Booth, si Catherine Booth. Because of her influence in the formation of the Salvation Army, she was known as the mother of the Salvation Army. Siya mama sa known as the mother. A mother of Maud Booth and wife of William Booth. So mama ni siya ni Maud Booth. Dayon asawa ni William Booth. Their entire family contributed a good history of the people. So muna siya Catherine Booth. Today, volunteers are vital to religious programs, and without them, inmates' participation would surely be limited. So karon, nadala ra jud sa ato ang kuan ron na like ang mga volunteers na po kuan ra Japon sa religion, like sa mga jail, sa mga prisuhan. Faith representatives would be unable to minister to the large number and variety of inmates. Many older correctional institutions are being refurbished or destroyed, replaced with facilities designed for better observation and security. So katong mga kuan na mga karaan nga mga correctional mga kuan gipangguba na to para ilisan og bago. Yet the initial influence of religion of the philosophy and the design of the penitentiary will surely remain in correctional history. So antiquity and modernity. Antiquity and modernity explores the ways in which the ancient world is constructed through the lens of modern art, literature, and scholarship, focusing especially on contemporary media. So this is the muna ilang like murag grandstand before nilang kamurag Kapitolyo. With the exception of Italy, France is the only rivaled by Spain for the number of ruins in both. In the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, remnants of classical edifices were an integral part of the urban landscape. Many owed survival to their economic considerations, since it was often more profitable to serve and transform than to destroy them. The influence of Roman Catholic Church. Roman Catholic Church had complete influence over the lives of everyone in medieval society, including their beliefs and values. So, daghan jud kayo nag-impluwensya sa Catholic. Depende man sa imong pagtuo. Pero wala kung asa ka nga simbahan, dito jud ka. The church frame in power and wealth had provided them with the ability to make their own laws and follows their own social hierarchy. Pope John Paul II was the head of the Catholic Church and sovereign of the Vatican City-State from 1978 until his death in 2005. He was elected Pope by the Second Papal Conclave of 1978, which was called after John Paul I, who had been elected in August to succeed Pope Paul VI, died after 33 days. The Vatican announced Friday that Pope John Paul II would be declared a saint after it was proven he had performed two miracles, both of them after his death. So ang mga gikuan siya after sa iyang death, ang mga Vatican may nag-announce. December 19, 2009, John Paul II was proclaimed venerable by his successor Benedict the 16 and was beatified on May 1, 2011, Divine Mercy Sunday, after the Congregation for the Causes of Saints and attributed one miracle to his intercession, the healing of a French nun called Marie Simeon Pierre from Parkinson's disease. So, muna si Father John, Pope John Paul II. Ano atong Pope? So, Walnut Street Jail was the first American prison established in 1973 and soon followed the Newgate in New York in 1979. So, Walnut Jail mo siya pinakaunang prisuhan sa Amerika. Gisundan sa Newgate in New York 1979. So, Walnut Street Jail. So, karaan jud siya. So, Newgate Prison was New York's first state penitentiary, opening in 1797 on the Hudson River. Envisioned as the model prisons for reforming those charged with serious crimes other than murder and arsons, which were capital offenses. It soon became overcrowded, at some points housing almost double its intended capacity of 446 prisoners. The communal nature of the prisons allowed for constant interaction between inmates and made it prone to violent riots. So, lagi kung mapuno, jud na, jud may nagoy posibilidad ng mag-riot. So, muna yung Newgate in New York prisons. So, King Henry VIII, King Henry of England from 1509 to 1547, he broke with the Roman Catholic Church and had Parliament declared him supreme lead of the Church of England, starting the English Reformation because the Pope would not annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. He wanted to remarry and produce a male heir, and he was the powerful man and charismatic figure, and also the best known of his his tumultuous love life and the establish of the Church of England. So siya si King Henry. He also he is also created establishing the Royal Navy, encouraging shipbuilding and the creation of anchorage and dockyards. King Henry VIII was brutal, selfish, and at times very unpleasant, but despite this, it's hard to deny that King Henry VIII was a very accomplished leader. So, muna siya, King Henry VIII. This one. Ni. So, King Edward VI, a jewel of King Henry VIII, King of England and Ireland. Wow, siya may king sa England ug Ireland. January 28, 1547 until his 1553. Crowned at the age of 9 on February 20, 1547. 9 pa yung edad. Na king na. His parents was Jane Seymour and King Henry VIII, the first English monarch to be raised as Protestant. It was during Edward's reign, and Protestantism was established for the first time in England, with reforms that included the abolition of clerical celibacy and the mass, and the imposition of compulsory services in English. So, muna siya, ganayin pag ito na siya, tawaran siya crown, ni anak ni nilang King Henry VIII. King Edward, ano siya, 6. So, that's all. Thank you for watching and listening.